Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Random Redshirt podcast. I am Zach, one of the hosts, and the other host is Chris. What's up, buddy?
Hello, Zach, my great friend. Hello, everyone around the world and the interweb and hopefully Antarctica. Thank you so much for joining us. It's wonderful to be here, Zach. We have survived another week of our professional lives. We have made it through, and as always, I look forward to enjoying this time together, my friend.
Yeah, and we are the red shirts that survive every episode, at least so far. We haven't died in any of these episodes yet. So as long as we continue this trend, we'll be okay. We'll make it through, right?
Yeah.
So yes, welcome to the podcast. For those of you who are tuning in and joining us for the first time, welcome. We are two nerdy guys like to talk about all things nerdy and geeky, from Star Trek to Star Wars and everything in between. Please be sure to check us out on Facebook and Instagram. Follow us there for all the latest updates and episode announcements. And be sure to go on to YouTube as well. If you're just listening to us on the audio side, you can find, I think we've got close to 60 videos, 60 of our episodes recorded on video. The rest of them are audio only, which is what we did initially when we first started recording this podcast. And Chris, we are going to be approaching in May 3 years. Can you believe it? And we just passed 100 episodes, like some, little milestones here.
Yeah, we are on episode 101 as of the
Yeah.
moment. Yeah, and it has been 3 years and it has gone by. It seems like 3 years was just yesterday,
Yeah.
because we've been enjoying. We've been enjoying doing this together, and it's so wonderful. And that is just it's so interesting to think about 3 years, right? And how fast it's gone. And we're talking about time in this particular episode, and we're doing
Yeah.
a deep dive on time. But it's just our perception of time and how it affects us. And this is just we've enjoyed this journey together, and it's been so quick. So
It really has. Like, where has the time gone, as they say? I don't know. I'm trying to find it personally, but yeah, it's it really has. It's gone by fast, and we've enjoyed every minute of this. It's been great. So again, we want to thank you, all those out there supporting and listening to us all over the globe. Maybe in Antarctica, as Chris is so hoping for. Maybe one day we'll get somebody who comments. I think, Chris, if somebody were to say, "Oh, I'm actually like a scientist in Antarctica right now," and I came across your podcast, I think you would probably like lose your mind.
I would lose my mind. Yes, I would. I'd
I
be
think
like,
you would. This is like
yeah,
this is like a quest for you, right? You're on a
yes,
quest to get listeners from Antarctica.
I
So
am on a quest. Yes.
that's right. You can be like Inigo Montoya from Princess Bride.
Yes,
But it's
that's
it's
right.
been good. We have enjoyed this. We love sharing these things. It's interesting if you go back and listen to our very first episode where we talk about our top 10 favorite sci-fi franchises of all time. Until now, the show has changed in many good ways, and we've got some incredible guests coming up for you. Um, and we cannot wait. If you've seen some of our announcements on Instagram and Facebook, we've got a podcast collaboration coming up with the Where's Bev podcast.
Hmm.
And we really look forward to that. We're going to do a captain mashup, a Star Trek captain mashup, where we're going to take different scenarios from different episodes within Legacy Trek, so original series through Enterprise, and we're going to throw different captains in those different scenarios and talk about how they would have responded. Would Janeway have lied and cheated and stolen her way through to get the Romulans in the Dominion War? That as just one example. There's so many out there we could use, but it's going to be a lot of fun. We're also looking forward to having Todd Marks with us, the playback
Yes.
supervisor from Star Trek Picard. He's worked on Jurassic Park. He's worked on so much. His list of projects he's worked on is incredible. Met him in Vegas, had dinner with him. He's a wonderful guy, and the technical stuff that we're going to learn from him is just going to be incredible. And then we're going to have a director on with us named Dan Liu,
Hmm?
who has directed Strange New Worlds. He's directed Star Trek Picard, The Walking Dead. He's a fantastic director, and we cannot wait to talk with him and then share that coming later next. All three of those episodes will be later next month in February of 2024. So we really look forward to that.
Yeah, it's going to be wonderful to have them on. We're going to learn a lot, and it's just going to be lovely to hear them share about their experiences and what they've contributed to. So it's going to be terrific, like you say.
It is. It is. Now, If you have been following us long enough, you know we started this Spotlight series where we were diving into the mirror universe. And please don't fret. We will get back to the mirror universe coming soon to a theater near you. Right now, we had a couple episodes, Chris, that we really wanted to dive into. Two episodes in particular. Well, the Voyager Year of Hell was technically a two-parter, but it was just a
Mhm.
solo episode for our podcast. But the Year of Hell Part 1 and 2, and then now the City on the Edge of Forever, which is what we're here to talk about today from Star Trek the original series. And these were two separate episodes that we really wanted to talk about as we jumped back to what we call the Prime universe, and dive deep, because they're just really fantastic episodes.
Indeed, they are fantastic. They really make you think. They both happen to be related to the concepts of time. So, like, strangely enough, right, with the year of hell, there was the whole thing about manipulating time, and time being an entity. But then, City on the Edge of Forever is very much dealing with time and decisions and impacts of individuals. In time. So it's, in a way, it was kind of natural that, like, after we were doing the Year of Hell Spotlight, our minds kind of mutually gravitated towards Toss and, this particular episode, the City on the Edge of Forever. So I think it was quite lovely that this kind of evolved like that, and this is going to be fantastic to talk through.
Yeah, it really is. And so we really look forward to it. And this episode, we talked about this before, Chris. I think it was last night. This episode I have seen regularly appear on lists of Star Trek episodes as the greatest episodes of all time from Star Trek. This usually is at the very top. If not number one, it's one of the top two. But I have consistently seen it voted the greatest episode of Star Trek of all time. Now everybody's going to have their opinions, right? And some people are going to have their favorites that are maybe more than this episode. But this certainly has been one of the crown jewel episodes within the Star Trek franchise, and in particular the original series.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know about you, but like when I was growing up and this was on syndication and this was on reruns, for some reason this episode, City on the Edge of Forever, always would come into my mind when I remember Star Trek the original series. I would just have these fond memories of Kirk and Spock and McCoy being in the 1930s, and particularly of Kirk and Edith Keeler. That, for some reason, this episode is just very vibrant, like in my mind growing up, and I really remember it. So, just maybe that kind of subconsciously means it's a favorite of mine, like from the original series. So it's interesting.
Yeah, this is definitely a favorite of mine from Toss for sure. If I think to what I would consider the top five greatest episodes from the original series, this is certainly up there. I mean, my favorite personally from the original series is Let That Be Your Last Battlefield, which is a really, really hard look at racism. And it was really important and really impactful back in the late 60s with all the civil rights movements going on and things like that. And this concept of this alien chasing down another member of its species simply because the black on one side of his face was flipped and different from the black on the other person's face, and one side was white, one side was black, and the other one was flipped, and they believed that the ones that were flipped from them were inferior and therefore lesser beings. They didn't have the same rights and all that kind of stuff. And this guy's chasing, played by Frank Gorshin, right, the original Riddler from Batman, chasing this other one around all over the galaxy for thousands of years. So obviously they live a long time, and then they're brought home and their world is gone. Like everything's and that look on their face of, well, was this really worth it, right, all these years? So that episode to me, I think we talked about this last night, Chris. That episode to me is one of the episodes I think of right away when someone talks about the original series.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a standout episode.
Yeah,
for sure.
It's really, really impactful. And in fact, I remember a teacher from high school, big Star Trek fan, and she said that was her favorite episode as well. was Let That Be Your Last
Wow.
Battlefield. I'm pretty sure it was, if not her favorite, is one of her favorite for sure. Just super, super impactful, really well written, really good episode. But we are here
Nice.
today to talk about The City on the Edge of Forever with the absolutely brilliant Joan Collins, who plays Edith Keeler. And it's interesting, Chris, as we were looking through this, this isn't the only episode. It's the first one, but it's not the only episode that features the Guardian of Forever that appears in this.
You're right. It is not. And I actually learned, and you just taught me this. This is great. I learned about this, but the Guardian of Forever shows up in the animated series, the original animated series, as well as Discovery, I believe too, in a different form, but it's still the Guardian of Forever. Like, and Lower Decks, right? Also appears on Lower Decks. So I'm really glad that the Guardian of Forever kind of spawned its own kind of mythos or legacy, and kind of continues on in the different Trek series. And maybe this is like a sub spotlight where we can take a look at how the Guardian of Forever is like impacts in the different Star Trek series. That'd be kind of interesting to see what they've done.
Yeah, it really would be. This episode, I think, was really important to Star Trek, especially early on. And then we see the effects and the ripples of this episode throughout other Star Trek series in the franchise, right? With the animated series that came on in the 70s after this show had been canceled in the late 60s, right? And then all the way into New Trek with Discovery and Lower Decks. So this episode is still having an impact all these years later.
Yeah, it is. And I think the idea felt, I go back to this idea of the time travel, and they're using terminology like time displacement waves. And I'm not that familiar with all of the science fiction that was available like in that particular year, but this seems like very, very forward and visionary kind of thinking. So it's just kind of really pleasing to kind of see these ideas being on the screen.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you think about back during the 60s, right? And compared to today, right? Some of the scientific knowledge they would have had would have been not as well known, right? And
Yeah, of
so
course. Yeah.
Star Trek has always been kind of ahead of its time when it comes to theorizing possibilities scientifically, and these ideas and concepts. And a lot of these ideas and concepts that Star Trek came up with were used as inspiration for future scientists and astronauts and stuff that have actually implemented certain things.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I mean, just for example, think about the communicator, the little flip communicator that they used in the original series that spurred flip phone cell phones, many, many decades later.
Yeah.
So there's so many things. And this series has inspired so many people to go into different, STEM fields, right? Whether it's, science, math, engineering, medicine, you name it. I mean, there's been a lot of people inspired because of Star Trek and the things that it has done. So this idea, like you said, Chris, where it's throwing out these concepts that maybe ahead of its time, I think is really impactful and speaks to the impact Star Trek's had.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah. So let's jump into this. All right. Yeah. Let's jump into Star Trek, the original series, The City on the Edge of Forever. And it starts out, as many episodes of Star Trek do, of the original series, where the Enterprise is in orbit, red alerts going on, and they're going through what appears to be some sort of violent thing. And we learn very quickly that these are some type of time distortion surrounding this planet that the Enterprise is orbiting.
Yeah, it's an unexplored planet. They're apparently going through time turbulence.
Like on a plane. Everybody get your vomit bags out.
Right. And they're going through that, and the captain is instructing Mr. Sulu to say, steady as she goes. And they're kind of riding those waves. You know what was kind of funny, just as an aside, as they're going through this turbulence. So you have many of them are sitting right in chairs, and you've got a few of them that are like, standing up. And I felt bad for the I'm not sure if she was a yeoman or you know a lower level like a officer, but all of the like I guess the senior crew, they're all sitting down, and you've got the yeoman and Scotty like just standing up, and I'm like going, they should be like sitting down going through this turbulence like that.
Well, yeah, fasten your seatbelts, everybody.
Yeah.
It's about to get bumpy, as they say on the airplanes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I found it interesting, Chris, when I was watching this. I found it kind of funny, right? So there's some of this cheesiness, right? A little
Mhm.
hokiness from the original series, but this moment where you see the people sitting down and they're like swaying back and forth, right? They're being told, "Hey, go right, go left," as the ship shakes, and the people standing up are just like, they're not moving as much. Don't you think if the ship is shaking like that really violently, that the people standing up are flying back and forth across the bridge? There's no
Totally.
restraints there, right? So
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
I just found that kind of funny. That's like the people sitting down are not shaking or shaking much more and moving more violently. The people standing up are just kind of like, yeah, we're swaying. We're like on a boat in the ocean. And you would have thought they'd have been flying across the bridge, but
I guess not. Yeah.
yeah. And I get it. I know it's just a TV show, right? It's just a
Yeah.
TV show,
It's
but
just a TV show.
I just found it funny. Although some people might say that and go, "Oh my gosh, that's sacrilege! How dare you call Star Trek this a TV show?" But it is just a TV show, folks.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. So they hit some sort of bad turbulence, and there's a small like explosion
Yeah,
like on the bridge that affects Sulu, right? Knocks him
yeah,
out.
right at his console.
Yeah, right at his
Yeah,
console.
yeah,
So he's
like targeted explosions.
yeah. So he's knocked out, and McCoy soon comes on the bridge, luckily enough. So they get him on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and thank goodness for this miracle drug known as cordrazine,
Yeah.
because a couple drops helps out Sulu and he's able to get him up. But one thing that we note that becomes a major player in merely a matter of moments is that when McCoy arrives and says that Sulu's got some kind of heart thing going on, he prepares it and he's warned by Kirk that it's, I guess, tricky stuff. I don't know why Kirk's warning him. I guess Kirk's a doctor too or something. But the two drops that McCoy gives him is successful. A little, it was like red liquid or something like that. And then unfortunately, there's another violent shake, and McCoy's not sitting down. He doesn't have a seatbelt fastened. He's not following the lights in the overhead storage compartments and everything like that, right? So because his seatbelt's not securely fastened, what happens? He goes flying in on the bridge and falls over and stabs himself with the hypo spray and administers into his like chest area or whatever all the rest of the cordrazine into his body. And then he comes up with some type of overdose effect or reaction, and now he's psychotic. And it's
Yeah.
like, wow, the difference between two drops and the whole thing is from
Mhm.
saving your life to becoming psychotic. That's a big jump. Like that's some kind of medicine that have to be under lock and key, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So some safety suggestions we could have for the Enterprise and the crew now are like seat belts, right? For there. And then on that, because the cordrazine is tricky stuff,
Yeah.
maybe you have to hit like two buttons at the same time to be able to inject it, and that might that might help from any accidental injections for McCoy.
Yeah. Maybe
Yeah.
like a safety valve in there or something, right? So you can't
Yeah.
inject it all. It'll only allow a little bit amount at a time. Because otherwise, like if it only needs a couple of drops, why would you ever need to administer any more than a couple of drops at a time, right?
Yeah.
Would you
Yeah.
never need to administer the whole thing, right? So why would you? A safety thing would be good. Little
Safety.
safety
Yeah,
button. Yeah.
exactly. I did really like that interplay when Captain Kirk he's like, well, Doctor, yeah, tricky stuff. And McCoy's like always, he's very good at being annoyed, so I like that he's annoyed at Kirk with that.
Yeah. There was a really funny meme I saw one time, Chris, and it's this. I don't know who it was. This picture of this girl, or whatever, and she's got this annoyed look on her face.
Yeah.
And the meme says like something to the effect of, "Have you ever been so annoyed by someone that you are like pre-annoyed, like you're already ready to get annoyed because you're like pre-annoyed, and it just McCoy always has that look on his face of pre-annoyed, right? Like he's
Yeah.
already pre-annoyed with what he knows is coming that's going to annoy him, and this is kind of something similar, you know.
Yeah, that's right. You I mean, whether it's Spock or Kirk, they can really annoy McCoy. Yeah,
They
yeah,
do. They do.
yeah,
He is and under constant bombardment of annoyance, I would say. But
yeah, he does.
yeah, it's very interesting. So he's tagged with all this Cordrazine, and then he starts screaming and ranting and raving about
Hmm?
killers and assassins. So clearly, this Cordrazine has some type of hallucinogenic effect when it's administered in such a large dose. And then he is able to escape the bridge somehow. I guess it also gives him superhuman strength because now all of a sudden he can push everybody off. I mean, shouldn't Spock have just run over there and Vulcan nerve pinched him and knocked him out, and then they get him down to sick bay and heal him? And of course, we'd have no rest of the episode. But
Yeah,
yeah, he gets off the bridge and goes into the turbo lift, and then we cut to, of course, the infamous intro of Star Trek.
yeah, that's right. That's right. Oh, I love how McCoy, like after he's escaped the bridge and he's on the run, we see him go into the transporter room shortly after, and I love that scene because he comes behind the transporter officer, and then he does like these quick chops right to dispatch the
Yeah,
transporter off. I'm like, wow, okay, bam,
yeah.
bam, and then he took him
Transporter Chief
out.
Kyle took one on the neck.
I know.
That's terrible.
Well, I mean, McCoy's got some skills, I guess.
Apparently, he all of a sudden learned the Vulcan, like the Kirk chop.
Yeah.
Kirk's always chopping dudes, and he uses the two hand smack and there's a chop. We could do a whole episode just on like the three basic moves that Kirk uses on every alien or bad guy to fight. So it's like the
Kirk,
same three moves over and over again.
he does. Kirk has a very specific stylized fighting style.
I don't know if style is the word I would use, but he certainly has something.
Yeah, love that. Love that. But yeah, he gets, Kirk, not Kirk, McCoy, he eventually he transports down to the surface, right? And then
Yep.
they gotta follow him. They gotta try and save him. So the Kirk and Spock and Uhura, and I guess Galloway is her name. Is she an ensign or she's another officer? I don't know if we know.
Pretty sure she's a Redshirt, isn't she?
Redshirt, yeah.
Yeah.
And then we've got a couple other red shirts that follow on down to beam down.
Yeah, so Galloway's a man, Lieutenant Galloway, a male human, and then other security officers. So it's very befitting, right, that we have red shirts beamed down in this particular episode. I mean,
Yeah.
after all, we are the random red shirts here, right? So we have these random red shirts that beam down to the surface, and it's interesting too. Before the landing party beams down, Spock does what he does best, as you know, Chris, and he does some research and finds out that this Cordrazine overdose makes people hysterical. They think they're in mortal danger. They become very, very dangerous to not only themselves but other people around them. And the Kirk is informed that McCoy has transported himself down to the planet, and unfortunately, by doing this has got to go through Kirk's mind. Like, okay, we've got these time distortions going on. He's just beamed down. Could that have affected the transport? Don't know, but they know they got to go after him and help him. I mean, he's their friend and he's the chief medical officer. And then, as you said, they get this landing party together with Kirk, Spock, Scotty. Which interesting, Scotty and Uhura go down as well. You would have thought that Scotty would have stayed in the ship, because there's been other episodes too, right, where Kirk and Spock and McCoy will beam down, and then Mr. Scott is left in charge of the bridge, in charge of the ship while they're down on the planet surface.
Yeah, you're right. That was an odd choice on why Scotty would go down, I guess. Yeah. That was, I mean, it's great that he was there, but that is an odd choice. I think having him back at the ship would have made like some sense, especially if the ship was going through some potential turbulence. You might want your chief engineer up there to help deal with any ship problems.
Yeah, I'm not really sure. Well, it's TV show, right? But when we look at this, right, you kind of you pick it apart a little bit, and you're like, yeah, why didn't he stay on the surf, up on the ship? Because there's other episodes where they go down to a surface and there's no danger of any kind at the moment, and he's up on the ship. So I'm not really sure why, but there's certainly some red shirt representation there between him and Uhura, and then the random Galloway and the other security officers that beam down. Um, but they get down to the surface, and right away they come into picture with this, you know, opening, right? This round object that they don't know what it is, and they kind of go up to it, and this is where the thing starts talking to them.
Yeah, I think they're asking. Kirk asks what it is out loud. They're just thinking, yeah, what is this? And then the question, this bodiless like voice comes out saying a question, like, since before your sun burned hot in space and before your race was born, I have awaited a question. I thought that was beautiful.
Yeah, it's evident that this Guardian is lonely a little, right? I mean, this is
Mhm.
the Guardian. Initially you think, okay, it's just a portal, but as you realize, as the episode goes on, and even at the end, you realize that the Guardian of Forever has to be some type of sentient life form that has
Mhm.
the ability to transport people through time. Because as he said, or as the Guardian says, a question, since before your sun burned in space, before your race born, I have awaited a question. So he's giving himself this pronoun I, right?
Yeah.
And say, or is it? Yeah, it's a pronoun, isn't it? Isn't I a pronoun? Anyways, he refers it refers to itself in the form of I. So therefore, you think, okay, sentient life form,
Yeah.
right? And it's looking for a question. It's looking for something to challenge its intellect, its ability. Clearly, Guardian of Forever tells you this thing's been around for a very, very, very long time as well.
Yeah.
And in
Yeah.
fact, I think it actually explains that it's both a machine as well as some type of being.
That's right.
So we do learn that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that it says that to Spock, right? Explaining that I'm both machine and being, but neither at the same time.
Yeah.
Um, and it's Spock that kind of makes the deduction that the Guardian is a time portal.
Mm.
Other times, other dimensions, and the Guardian like confirms with Spock, essentially, that's correct. So
Yeah.
yeah. So I really liked that this time portal, you have this sense that this time portal like is alive. Because then you kind of connect that to the concept that time is alive. And so you have, right, a Guardian there. I'm connecting this to the Year of Hell because I really like
Yeah.
that, the Year of Hell. But
Yeah,
you know,
we talked about that idea. Like, I'm glad you mentioned the
uh,
idea of time being alive, because we did talk about that in Year of Hell, and the way that Anorax talked about hell, or talked about hell, wow, talked about time as breathing, right? And in the sense kind of made it seem like it was alive.
yeah,
So that was good. I'm glad that you connected that, because there is a sense of connection with that two-part episode and this episode because of time and the way it's looked at.
yeah. I mean, the concept here, like, yeah, in Year of Hell, it says, the past, present, and future, they exist as one. This is an example of that, where you've got this Guardian of Forever, this time portal, and um, you've got the ability to go back in time with Kirk and Spock there together, being in their present but our future, but all of this concepts like exists at the same place at once, and it's one. So I think it's a beautiful juxtaposition
Yeah.
right there. Yeah.
Yeah, and Spock he takes out his little
Mhm.
tricorder, right? The little purse tricorder,
Yeah.
and begins to scan the Guardian, and that's how he's, like you said, able to deduce, yeah, this looks like it's moving through human time. We don't really have a way of being able to choose, right, a specific day to go through, or anything like that, but they're seeing these centuries of time on Earth pass pretty quickly, and it's obviously what's being played or look like old black and white movies, right? but
Yeah.
but time is passing, and he's able to capture some of the images at the same speed with his tricorder, which, by the way, is a very important thing to note for later in the episode when he attempts to access his tricorder and make something in order to look through time and figure out what's going on and where they're at and so forth. But McCoy is then spotted by the landing party as they search out trying to look for him, right? And then he's found, he's cornered. Spock does the old Vulcan nerve pinch on him because it's evident that McCoy is still out of his mind, thinking that there's people out to get him and assassinate him. And, you know, Spock's able to get him this time, right? With
Yeah,
the whole
Spock's able to
Vulcan
catch
nerve
him.
pinch. Yep.
Yeah.
He's able to catch him. And they lay him down, and then they're doing more investigating of this Guardian of Forever. And then McCoy wakes up and says, and then he runs and jumps through the portal, and they're just like, oh, what the heck just happened, and that leads to more discussion.
Does. And what were those red shirts doing? Like the security guards to let like McCoy like slip through their fingers, essentially.
They were being red shirts, man.
They were being red shirts.
It was interesting. There's an episode. I saw a clip of this earlier when I was going through some sound bits from the episode Obsession, right? Where Kirk gets obsessed over that alien like cloud of whatever it is, because it killed somebody, or was it when he was younger in his career, kill people on his away team or something like that. And the red shirts that are there, they get attacked over and over again. They can't do anything. They're cannon fodder.
They get decimated.
They get decimated. Yep. And they're dead. And so they're doing the same thing, Chris. They're there, but they're not really, they're there to die, pretty much is what goes on here. And, we could do a whole episode just on, what captain had the most deaths under his command, or maybe was the least able to take care of their crew and make sure they all got out in one piece. And that could be a whole episode, but
that could be a whole episode, man.
Yeah. So
absolutely.
Uhura, after McCoy jumps through the Guardian, Uhura makes a very fascinating discovery.
Yeah, she cannot connect with the Enterprise, having trouble connecting, and Scotty tries connecting. They're not able to connect. There's nothing wrong with your equipment, nothing wrong with the communicators. Ship just isn't there.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And then I believe it is the Guardian that lets them know that, hey, time has changed. So
you don't say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was is no longer. And so they're kind of stuck now. There's no.
Yeah. He also something like the effect of all that you knew is gone.
Yeah.
And I mean, imagine being there and being like, what?
Yeah.
What? Like, man, that'd be tough. It
would be tough. This is kind of like this is the plot of the Terminator, right? So they go back and they go, back in time to change the future. So,
yeah, except for the Guardian is not Skynet in this case. Guardians are trying to kill them, but yes.
Yeah,
that's true.
Right.
It's interesting. Yeah. It's really interesting, Chris, as we've talked about a variety of different science fiction franchises on this podcast over the last couple of years, right?
Yeah.
And we've talked about a variety of different topics to include artificial intelligence, which is getting very scary, I think, time travel, things like that. And the story of the Terminator, that concept, right? It's been used many a times in science fiction, but it's been I guess approached differently in many different ways.
Yeah, it sure has. And it's just neat. It's neat to see the different creative like iterations of going back in time to try and change the future. And some things that they have in common is there always seems to be a focal point or an inflection point, like in time, where there's a purpose. Hey, there's this particular individual, or there's this particular like event, like that spawns all of these different things. So that becomes the focus of them going back in time. Just like this episode here, because when they go back in time, the kind of nexus is an individual. Right? So it's in this case, it's Edith Keeler, and Terminator was John Connor.
And we see that in Back to the Future a little bit, right? Where
Yes.
that Doc points out that this November 5th, 1955 could be the whole center of the space-time continuum, or it could just be a big coincidence. One or the other. But
Yeah.
that's a very, very, very good that you brought that up, because I think when we look at time, when we look at movies that deal with time, there is that focal point, right? They deal with it, and I mean, we're talking about Jean-Claude Van Damme. Time Cop 2 has
Hmm.
something similar, right? With the senator and him wanting to go back in time, and him kind of being that focal point of all these different ripples that are going on in time, because he's sending these guys back in time to make him rich, right, by
Yeah.
abusing time travel. So you're right, very, very similar in that regard. In this case, Edith Keeler is a massive turning point in human history, unfortunately not in a good way.
Yeah.
But yeah, so uh McCoy's gone. And thankfully, the scans that Spock got from the Guardian on his tricorder, that he went somewhere back in the early 20th century, but that's pretty vague. And
Yeah.
it's pretty hard. Like, I think Spock even says at one point, it's going to be really hard to be able to jump into the same, you know, year or decade or whatever, let alone even the same week. So it's one of those where Spock just kind of has to make his best guess, as he says. And remember in Star Trek 4: The
Yeah.
Voyage Home, where McCoy's like, you got to take your best shot. He's like, best shot? Guess, Spock. You got to guess. He's like, I can't do that, or whatever, And at the end, he's like, I gave it my best shot, or whatever. And that whole scene on board the Klingon ship between McCoy and Spock was just fantastic. And
Yeah.
I think, didn't McCoy even say at one point, he's like, I think I like you better before you died, or something like that.
Yeah. 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 He does.
Oh, the interplay of McCoy and Spock is just, I mean, roll on the floor laughing is
Yeah.
so, it's so good. It's so
Yeah. It
good.
is really good. It is really
So
good.
in this case, Spock has to, kind of guess a little bit.
And his, fortunately his guesses are excellent. So they're excellent guesses. And but before they leave and jump through the portal, Kirk and Spock, Kirk says a goodbye to essentially to the rest of the crew, to Hura and Scotty, saying, hey, you guys, if you have to, go ahead and jump through the portal, just to live out your life. So,
Mm,
so I thought that was good, because
yeah.
all of them are gonna have to try, which was good. Which was good. That was
Yeah. Imagine Kirk and Spock having lived their life out in the 1930s. I mean, that's like, pretty close to almost 300 years in the past.
yeah.
That'd be rough. I mean, it'd be like us jumping back to the 1720s. I mean, that'd be rough. It'd be a much different life.
Be really hard. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think in sorry, my mind just wandered a little bit, but in Doctor Who, Amelia Pond, she was transported way back in time by the Weeping Angels, and so she lived out her life like way in the past.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah,
interesting.
definitely. So, Chris, we get the scene where Kirk and Spock, they do the famous jump into the Guardian, right into the portal.
Mhm.
And then they arrive in New York City, circa, we find out as the episode goes on, circa 1930.
Yeah, near the Depression, I believe, because we kind of see evidence of that. So yeah, and you see the old style buildings, the old style cars, and they're there walking around in
Yeah.
the 30s.
Yeah, Kirk's able to figure out kind of sort of around the time period that they've arrived, just because he recognizes the period from some old photographs and so forth. And Spock does make reference that this period of time, there's economic upheaval, aka Great Depression kind of era. A lot of people are poor, a lot of people don't have any work. People are hurting, people are struggling, and they from the moment they arrive on the streets, they stand out like a sore thumb, do they not? I mean,
Yeah.
their Starfleet uniforms look grossly different than anything that anybody else is wearing.
Yeah, they sure do. Everyone's like staring at them. Kirk sees some clothes like hanging up, and he gets the idea like, oh, I'm gonna go get those clothes. And I think Spock says stealing, and Kirk's like, no, we're gonna return them. So I thought that was nice. So they do Kirk does I think he climbs up the ladder and gets the clothes and comes back, and of course they get caught.
Of
Of course they
course.
get caught. And so it's kind of funny when they got caught, and then they have to explain Spock somehow, right? They've got to explain his ears. His ears were caught in an automatic rice picker, I think was what happened.
Yeah, because I guess I think Kirk is the one that says something like he's Chinese,
Yeah.
and that he got his head caught in a mechanical rice picker. I'm just like, oh gosh,
Yeah.
not quite the things you'd hear these days in shows and movies, but back in that period of time, that was would have been kind of, I guess, common, or wouldn't have necessarily been something that maybe stood out as much. But yeah, he had to explain it some way, right? And I love the line
Yeah.
that Kirk says too, Chris, where Spock's calling him out on the stealing. He goes, "Well, we'll rob from the rich and give back to the
Oh,
poor
that's
later,"
right.
like a
Later. Yeah.
little Robin Hood, right? Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. He is, that's his justification. So they're able to escape the officer with, Spock is able to do like a distraction and do the Vulcan nerve pinch, and they're able to get away, and then find a place to hide out, escape, and in what turns out to be the basement, um, a very important basement, the 21st Street mission basement. So
yeah,
yeah,
very important. Interesting that they went into this basement, right, of all places, because if they had gone to some other basement, they may not have ever found McCoy, right? Because he's
yeah,
taken in later by Edith, and they wouldn't have found Edith Keeler, but they're quickly discovered down in the basement, right? They're just finishing up changing, and as she's coming down, Spock hurries up and puts on the, what's it, a beanie or watch
yeah.
cap or whatever you want to call it, right? I don't know what they would have called it back in the 30s, but puts on the little beanie, and to cover his ears, and I guess maybe slightly the end of his eyebrows, but mostly his ears, right? And this very beautiful, intelligent woman comes down, played by Joan Collins, named Edith Keeler. And you could tell Kirk has a little bit of love at first sight. Like
Yeah,
he's very taken aback by her beauty very quickly.
yeah, yeah. He absolutely is. And Edith Keeler is you can tell she's a very compassionate person, and so she essentially hears a little bit of their story. Kirk explains, hey, we didn't have any money, we we had to get these, we stole these clothes, and she is very compassionate to the situation, and offers them a job at the mission, doing some chores at 15 cents an hour,
Oh
which
gosh.
which they take.
$1.50 a day, right?
$1.50 a day.
That's
That's right.
crazy. But back then, back in the 30s,
Hmm.
$1.50, you could go down and get, you know, a bag of groceries, bag of some food if you needed to, right? Because stuff wasn't nearly as expensive as it is now.
Yeah, yeah. But that starts them off, working at the mission, being able to find a place to stay, and then kind of developing that relationship and getting to learn who Edith Keeler is,
Yeah.
which was good. And
And that gives Spock a place to set up to start working on a device of some kind to help be able to access his tricorder.
his hobby,
Yeah.
as he
Yeah. His
says,
hobby. Yeah.
his hobby.
That's right.
Yeah, that was kind of funny. So, yeah, so we get to see some of the mission and see what we're doing and learn more about Edith Keeler. And I really like the scene in the mission where they're eating, and they're meeting, they're talking to that other man in the mission, and he's like, okay, now here's the part where we have to pay for the food, which is essentially listen to Edith talk, right? And then she
Right.
comes up and she's talking, and she's, yeah, essentially giving a monologue or her thoughts or of what the future is going to be and her vision for the future. And
Yeah. To a certain extent, she's kind of lighting the fire underneath the people's butts there, right? Like, hey, you need to if you're just here to whatever, you need to go get a job, kind of thing. She's
yeah,
trying to get people on their feet. She's helping them, but not at the point where she's unwilling to try to get them out the door to help them recover, get jobs, whatever. And it's not just a charitable thing where they can just come and mooch all the time because they're sitting around doing nothing. You know what I mean? Like it's this kind of, light a fire under their rear while also talking about what things are going to be like in the future. And I think that's what catches Kirk's attention, because he's like, wow, like this woman has ideas that are groundbreaking for right now, but really are just telling a story of what's to come.
yeah, revolutionary for the time. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Groundbreaking for the time. Yeah. So that's good. I mean, as they're working at the mission, as they're working to buy the tools for Spock's hobby, so he can work on his tricorder and try and figure out where McCoy is gonna end up coming. Spock kind of learns some stuff through that about Edith Keeler, right? He learns that she's very important apparently, but he learns that he comes across her obituary, I believe, in that course of him putting together his equipment.
Yes, he
Yeah.
does. And then he also comes across uh like future events from their point in time where they're at, of Edith Keeler becoming this important person, um because he tries to replay that image of her
Mhm.
obituary for Kirk. But then another article comes up from, I think it's like 1936 maybe, and it's talking
Yeah.
about Edith meeting with President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And then that's where everything overloads and it shorts out. It's like, yeah, this like board of like incandescent light bulbs that are all strung together somehow as a computer back then that works. But yeah, it really it cuts out too early, and they're not able to fully learn exactly what is going on. But then you get into this question is, okay, so Edith Keeler plays some type of important role in this period of time, but they don't know what that is yet.
Yeah. They're not, they're not sure. And they're just speculating at the time because the tricorder kind of blew a circuit. So um, Spock, speculating through the different scenarios, I believe he asked Kirk the question of like, hey, suppose that they discover that in order to set things right again, that, her dying is correct for history, for their version of history.
Yeah.
Um, and of course, Kirk can't answer that question. He's just kind of, no one would be able to answer that. They're just like, wow.
Yeah, and it doesn't help either that Kirk's already kind of, he likes what he sees, right? He's very fond of her already,
Yeah.
and I think infatuated a little bit with her, and so this idea of her dying would just be something like, oh my gosh, we just met, and now there's this like, does she have to die because of
Mhm.
history? And that would be something that you'd be thinking like, going, oh my goodness gracious, this is awful, but yeah,
Yeah.
something that you kind of start to see that weight already begin to appear on Kirk's shoulders.
Yeah. 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 You do. You do. And, a little bit later in the episode, we get McCoy finally arriving. And so he's still crazy. He's
Yeah, he's got all
still
these
very
like these
crazy.
like
Yeah.
blotches all over him and everything, and he looks like albeit in this time period, he would look like somebody who maybe is sickly, living on the street, out of, crazy out of his mind. Maybe he's got alcohol problems or something. So from a personality perspective, he, other than his clothes, he really wouldn't probably stick out too much.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. It's just as close. Um, his first encounter is with another homeless like person. And so he's like, I think asking him like where is he? He's just trying to understand where he is. And unfortunately for that homeless person, if I'm not mistaken, like he's fiddling around with the phaser, and phaser gets the
It,
best of him, if I'm not
yeah.
mistaken. Right there.
Yes,
Yeah.
he overloads the phaser and then they disintegrate.
Man. Oh,
So the only good thing about that happening is now the phaser's gone, so it's not there in in time or out of place, right? And somebody gets their hands on the technology.
yeah. Yeah, that's too
So I
bad.
mean, Star Trek has dealt with those ideas of accidentally leaving tech laying around, right? Whether it's in a pre-warp civilization or a culture that doesn't quite have the tech they have, or back in time somewhere. There was an episode of Enterprise where they were on a planet. I remember watching not that long ago where the species is not a warp civilization yet, and they're like under Phlox helps them dress up to look like an alien on their foreheads, and they're undercover, and Lieutenant Reed leaves some stuff behind and they have to go back and get it because they don't want that to be left there in
Mhm.
that pre-warp civilization.
Yeah.
So something similar here. The only good thing that comes out of it, because obviously it's bad that this guy dies, is that the tech is now gone.
Yeah. It's disintegrated as well.
Yep.
Yeah. McCoy eventually finds his way into the 21st Street mission. Um, and he's in horrible shape. He's able to connect with Edith Keeler. Edith Keeler recognizes that he's in horrible shape, and then of course, being the compassionate person like she is, she wants to help him, which
Right.
she does. He's able to stay there, he's able to recover. And McCoy, being McCoy, believes like everything's like a hallucination. He doesn't think anything's like real, which I think is funny. And
Yeah.
he eventually believes that, oh, she's the only part that's real, everything else is a hallucination, which I liked.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And she helps nurse him back to health, gets him some coffee, takes care of him. And then very quickly after that see that Spock is now able to repair this computer light bulb board thing,
Yeah.
and access his tricorder. And then, based on the scans that he was able to take, McCoy, at some point in the next few days or whenever in the future, is going to prevent Edith Keeler from dying in some traffic accident as she was meant to in their timeline. And by doing this, she goes on, instead of dying, she goes on to form this pacifist movement,
Yeah.
which has an influence on the president of the United States, which delays the US's entry into World War II. And because of that, Nazi Germany has the opportunity to complete their weapons experiments. They develop the atom bomb first. Germany conquers the world, and everything's changed because of that.
Yeah.
And so, Spock, I believe, Chris, if I remember correctly in this scene, this is where Spock tells Kirk that they have to stop McCoy because Kirk has this thought of, okay, well, when when does she have to die? And Spock's basically like, well, we can kind of figure out general events, but we can't find the exact moment and the exact time when she's going to die. But we have to stop McCoy from saving her, in
Yeah.
essence, right? And you can see, because leading up to this, right, him at Kirk and has already taken Edith out to a movie, and they've had good time, and they've kissed, and they're starting to fall for each other. And now you can see Kirk's heart beginning to break because it's evident he's in love with her, but he also knows the grim, stark reality of what's to come, or
Mhm.
what is supposed to come if they're going to get back to their existence that they know.
Yeah. And he is definitely struggling with that, right? And it is tearing like at his heart. So that's really unfortunate. And Spock being completely logical, he's the one that's got to remind the captain that, hey, yeah, she must die.
Mm.
Um,
Oh, that'd be tough. The woman you love, has to die. right? Because of historical events.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that would be tough. That'd be really, really tough. I did find it interesting though, too, as we move through the episode here. So McCoy is recovering, right? And
Yeah.
Edith has nursed him back to health, like you said, very well put, that she can't help herself, right? This is who she is, right? It's part of her, it's in her soul to be this helpful, understanding woman and understanding person. And so McCoy is kind of talking kind of weird a little bit, not out of his mind, but just like the way he speaks about certain types of things.
Mm-hmm.
And this is when I believe this is when Edith goes, "Oh yeah, you need to meet my friend because he talks the same way you do." And I love how McCoy states one of his usual phrases, "Oh, I'm a surgeon, not a psychiatrist," right?
That's right.
Like it just that it wouldn't be a tossed episode without a McCoy quote like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that, yeah, McCoy. Gotta love his, yeah, gotta love his like kind of one-liners that he does. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. There's a scene shortly after this or immediately after this. This is the one again. It's with Kirk and Edith Keeler, and she's walking down the stairs and she almost, she trips. I really love that scene. I think it's pretty it's intimate in like in a way. Kirk reaches out to grab her to prevent her from falling. And after that, Spock is like, that fall might have like she might have died from that fall. And Kirk's like, well, there's no way he could have let her fall. Right. He's got to try and protect her. So I did like that scene on the stairs a lot because you get them very close. Kirk and Edith are close, and they even have more of a bonding moment from that, which makes what has to come later even more difficult, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that scene. I'm glad you mentioned that, Chris, because that scene was really impactful. This idea that Kirk is willing to what seems very simple, is just that, hey, she stumbles a little bit and he catches her fall, sort of, right? That has a foreshadowing
Mm-hmm.
of the way Kirk feels and what Kirk may be willing to do in order to save her. And the little exchange that Kirk has with Spock after is very interesting because Kirk says something to the effect of, it's not time yet. McCoy's not here. When Spock brings up the idea that she could have died right there on the stairs, that could have been when she died. And then he does, as you said, the logical Vulcan, right? He states, they can't be sure of their facts. They don't know when the right time will come. And he tells Kirk that if he saves Edith's life, millions will die who did not die before. And that's when you see Kirk's face just go, wow. I love this woman, but we're talking millions of people. Millions of people. So is it worth saving one life in order to that would affect millions, or is it worth allowing that life to pass in order to save millions, right? And we always hear the phrase from Spock of the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few and everything else, but if you love somebody, you're probably willing to go to great lengths, if not do whatever you have to do to protect them and save their life. And we'll get into more of that later, but I felt it was logical, but it was a little cold the way he says, Edith's life, that millions will die who didn't die before. And he's really got to make, I think it's almost like Spock trying to make Kirk, or remind Kirk of his duty as the captain, right? Like, Captain Jim, you've got to separate your emotion from this situation, because this is a situation, and if this continues on, this is going to have a massive ramification in human history. And I think he's trying to help Kirk separate. And I think this is just my thought, Chris. I don't know how you feel about this. I think this is the moment where Kirk decides what he's going to do. When Spock reminds him that millions are going to die, he's made up in his mind now. He knows what he has to do, even though he doesn't want to do it. He knows he has to let Edith die. I
maybe,
think this is it right here.
maybe so, maybe so. And I'm not 100%, but maybe so. He's certainly struggling, right? He's completely struggling, and he's wanting a way out, any other way out that's possible. This is what I'm thinking Kirk is thinking is mine. You brought up like the goods of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one. In a way, this is like the no-win scenario, the Kobayashi Maru for Kirk, right? And you're right that it's Spock that is reminding Kirk of what his duty is, like as a captain, right? It is Spock that is reminding Kirk, this is the logical choice of what you have to do to save these millions of people. Without Spock there, Kirk, I don't think would not have been able to make the choice that he makes at the end of the episode, right? Spock is just as important as Kirk, making that choice. Again, without Spock there, I don't feel that Kirk would have made that choice. There's a scene earlier where Edith Keeler is saying I think they're in the furnace room, and she's saying to them, like, you don't even appear to like belong like in this place or this time. And Kirk's like, well, where do you think we belong? And I don't remember the exact words she said, if she felt like, I think you belong in the future. I don't remember if she exactly says that, but for the way she describes Spock, she says, Spock, even when he doesn't say captain, he's saying it. Even with his silence, he's saying captain. And she's saying, Spock, he belongs at your side all the time, now into the future. So Spock being the one to remind Kirk of, millions will die, right? This is where Spock belongs, at his side, to remind Kirk of these like huge kind of impacts, these huge decisions, these huge things that only Kirk can do at the moment. And Spock being at Kirk's side, this is something that now this was an episode in the original series, but Spock is by Kirk's side in all of the movies, and which was wonderful, right? And Spock is of course by Kirk's side in Star Trek 1 and Star Trek 2. And I'm gonna flip it. The needs of the many are the needs of the many are more important than the needs of the few or the one. Because when Spock Spock dies in Star Trek 2, Star Trek.
Wait, what?
Yeah, spoilers for
Spock,
Wrath of Khan.
Spock dies? No, come on, Chris. Yeah. Now you just I can't even watch the movie now. I've already ruined the ending.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry, everybody. I'm sorry, those in Antarctica that the ending there.
They're cut off from movies since the 1980s. Yes.
Yeah. But there's a flip in Star Trek 3 and 4, because when I'm sorry, I'm going on. I'm just following my trail of thoughts here. But the flip in Star Trek 3 and 4 is they're trying to save Spock, so then the needs of the one outweigh the needs of the many. Because
for Kirk it does, right?
Right.
Because Kirk is so focused on getting Spock back because Spock means that much to him.
Yeah,
in their
Spock
friendship.
Yeah. So I love that this there, because I'm connecting this. We are connecting this idea that is in on City of Edge of Forever. We're flipping that idea around like decades later in one of the movies. But Spock and Kirk are always at each other's side.
Yeah,
that's
true. Yeah. It's true, and that's where they belong. They belong together, right? They this partnership, companionship. I mean, To me, Kirk and Spock's friendship is one of the greatest friendships in television history.
Hmm.
It really is. Kirk may be his commanding officer, but they have a friendship that's far deeper than that.
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought that scene up. I know we talked about that last night, and it's a wonderful scene. And the fact that this goes to show the level of perceptiveness. That's a word, right? I think,
Yeah.
isn't that a word? Anyways,
Thanks. Yeah.
the level of perceptiveness or perception that Edith has, right? Because she sees that. She doesn't even know them. She sees that. She sees that immediately with the two of them.
Yeah.
She doesn't know where they're from. They seem out of place. But regardless, she believes that he belongs at his side.
Hmm.
And that's just, I think that's a wonderful foreshadowing because she's so perceptive, right? It's a wonderful foreshadowing for the whole rest of their two lives. It's just unfortunate because of Star Trek Generations and the way they killed Kirk off that Spock wasn't there with Kirk at the end.
Yeah.
That part really sucked. But we all know,
Yeah.
and most people hate the way they killed off Kirk in Generations. And I some random planet, it was terrible. But
Yeah.
anyways, we're not here to talk about Generations, the way they killed Kirk. That's a whole other story, whole other episode. So yes, this is where we see that we see now that McCoy is fully healthy, and Edith tells him that she's going to the cinema to go see a movie with her friend.
Her young man.
Her young
She
man.
says
That's
it.
what he.
Her young
Yeah,
man's
her young man.
yeah.
This gentleman. This young man. That's
Yeah.
right. To see a
Yeah.
Clark Gable movie, and McCoy's like, I don't know who Clark Gable is, but I know what a movie is. Which she thinks is strange because back then, 1930, Clark Gable was a massive movie star. Ask my grandmother; she knows who Clark Gable is. He's a
Yeah.
massive.
Yeah.
Clark Gable was in Gone with the Wind. He's been in a lot of big time stuff. Big time actor. And in fact, this was 1930. In fact, I don't think Gone with the Wind wouldn't have been out yet. I think Gone with the Wind was like 1936
Oh.
maybe, or third. I don't remember the exact year. My grandmother would probably kill me if I didn't know that exact year offhand. But I mean, anybody who's a fan of film history knows Gone with the Wind and how
Yeah.
much of a massive movie that was back in the 30s. It's color and picture in the 30s. My goodness. So Kirk asks who he's been talking with, and she makes this offhand about Dr. McCoy. And he's like, McCoy. And then they run back, and then he comes out of the mission, and then,
Yeah.
McCoy. And then she starts going into the street. And that's when McCoy goes to save her, and Kirk stops him.
Yeah.
And she's hit. And he goes, no, Jim. And the ramifications, of course, are instantaneous. They know what happened. This moment, Chris, to me is the moment in this episode that gets me the most. And McCoy is, he's beside himself that Kirk stopped him from saving her. And he goes, you deliberately stopped me, Jim. I could have saved her. Do you know what you just did? And then Kirk, pushes McCoy aside, and Spock, this line kills me as I watched it this last time. And Spock says, he knows, Doctor. He knows.
Yeah.
And Kirk is heartbroken. He leans himself up against the building, and he knows that history has been restored. But in order to restore history, that meant allowing Edith to die, and his love dies with her. Oh gosh. That scene just got me, man. It got me.
Kirk is broken after that.
He is. Oh, at least till the
Yeah.
next episode and the next fling. But
Yeah,
yes,
till the next
he
episode.
yeah.
Yeah.
He is, though. You're right, 100%. He is broken. He's very, very broken. And you see that in the way you see that in how he comes back, right, to the
Yeah.
Guardian. And he's really not able to talk much, right? Because I think it's Spock who has to answer and to Uhura and Scotty and say that they were successful.
Yeah. And he can't look back at the Guardian,
No.
because he's just going to be looking back at what happened. And the Guardian's ending words I thought were significant. Time has resumed its shape, all as was before. Many such journeys are possible. Let me be your gateway.
Do you think, Chris, that Kirk in some way holds a grudge or blames the Guardian for what he had to go through
Yeah,
by his reaction of not wanting to look back and not wanting to, you know, have any
absolutely.
interaction with him after that. That he knows what he had to do, but the Guardian was the one that put him in that situation. I
Yeah.
mean, McCoy, at the end of the day, McCoy is right because McCoy jumped to the Guardian, but the Guardian basically forced them to have to go back and get him. Otherwise, time had changed, right? And they were going to have to. And I had this thought of, does Kirk now hold a grudge and blame the Guardian for what happened? I don't know if you thought that way or not, but that's kind of came to mind.
Yeah. I mean, he can't face the Guardian. He's broken, doesn't want to look at it. I think absolutely he would feel that.
Yeah.
And just not want to look back. And if and maybe that was the way it was always supposed to be, like in time, right? Maybe that was always supposed to happen, was Kirk was supposed to be the one to hold back McCoy. All of this was fated to happen anyways. And
Temporal
this,
mechanics, man.
yeah, temporal mechanics, and
Yeah.
this was all what was supposed to happen.
Yeah.
So
And
yeah.
Kirk's final line in this episode, I think, really, really captures how broken he is when they get back. And Kirk, he's very, very cold. He's very tense. And he says, let's get the hell out of here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He wants to leave. He knows what's happened. And the landing party beams up, they vanish, and the Guardian of Forever is left there again. Um, this episode, to me, hit pretty hard because I don't know. I'm curious on your thoughts, Chris, on how this episode impacted you, having gone back and watched it. I know you watched it again. Did you end up watching it twice? I know you mentioned you were gonna maybe do that. Did you end up rewatching it twice?
1.5 times. Yeah.
1.5 times. Okay.
Yeah.
I put myself in Kirk's shoes and I say, what if I was in a situation like this? Which, of course, I mean, realistically, I wouldn't be. But let's say I was in a situation like this and I had foreknowledge of the future. And for some reason, my wife had to die or something was going to happen that would affect many, many people for whatever reason. Could I pull myself to make the same decision that Kirk made, knowing that her death saves lives? I don't think I could do it, Chris.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think if I knew the foreknowledge of when my wife was to die and how, even if something simple as that, right? Like you knew the foreknowledge, Chris. You knew the day your wife was going to die. Let's say it was before you. Let's just, for the purpose of the conversation, they knew it was before you, and there was a way to prevent it. But for some reason, you were told you shouldn't prevent it, and here's why. If I was given that knowledge, I do not think I could do it.
Mm-hmm.
I really don't. It could save a billion lives. And maybe this sounds selfish, and this is just me. So I want to get your thoughts on this too.
Yeah.
It could save a billion lives, but to me, that life is more important than those billion. And some people might go, "Oh my gosh, how dare you? You would choose one life over a billion," but it's different.
Mm-hmm.
And Kirk knew that, and so he made what he believed was the right decision. But I don't know that I could come to make the same choice that Kirk makes, especially my wife, because I mean, him and Edith weren't married. They kind of fallen in love, but they weren't nearly in the same position that I'm in. So I don't think I could do it. I really don't. I have a hard time thinking I could. So I'm curious, Chris, on what your thoughts are
Yeah.
on the situation. Like if you were in Kirk's shoes.
And Kirk, I don't think Kirk would have made that decision without Spock.
That's a really good point.
Kirk would not have made that decision. And I'm extrapolating here, but if we think as Kirk as a character, like this kind of decision that he had to make on this particular mission would have influenced him as a human being, and maybe that's why he made some of the decisions that he made, like in the search for Spock, on saying, the the value of the individual sometimes outweighs all other factors.
Yeah.
And being able to save that individual. But to the question, no, I would not be able to do that, to let if I was in Kirk's shoes, and it was Edith Keeler, if it was in my power, it would be to prevent her from dying, because I would still think that perhaps there is another way
Yeah.
to change the course of history, as from Terminator 2, no fate but what we make.
Yeah.
So
Keep her away from the president. Just keep
yeah.
her away from the president, right? Don't delay the start, because don't delay this. You have that foreknowledge. Don't allow her to delay the start of the U.S. joining World War II.
Yeah.
And then everybody wins, right?
Everybody wins.
But then again, maybe let's say you prevent that from happening. But
Mm-hmm.
what's to say something else doesn't happen that you don't have foreknowledge of, that then changes history because of that? Because there's a ripple effect, right? This idea of ripple effect in time, which we learned through Year of Hell, right? The ripple effect in the timeline, by changing one thing here, there may be unintended consequences over here that you didn't calculate for, like what Anorax deals with Voyager.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, precisely. And in this particular episode, Edith Keeler was the focal point in time. She was the inflection point, which makes that's what makes the episode like appealing, and the question so hard. But I think in terms of how I feel and like humanity, it would be I would not be able to do that. Let Edith Keeler die.
Yeah. And of course, it's if they didn't have Kirk fall in love with her, the episode would not. If they had written it differently, right?
Mm-hmm.
The episode, who was the name of the author of this episode again? Do you remember? It was
Harlan Ellison, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep, you're right. Yeah. So if Harlan had written this episode differently, where instead Kirk doesn't fall in love with her, but he doesn't necessarily want to see her die either. So but he knows that what has to happen for his historical purposes and his future, so he still allows her to die, right?
Yeah.
It wouldn't be as impactful. It wouldn't be as powerful and as good as this episode is now, the way it's written, because that end scene that just gets me, and to me is the most difficult part of the episode to watch. It's also my favorite part, where McCoy says, "Did you know what you did or whatever? I could have saved her and everything like that." And Spock chimes in and says, "He knows, Doctor. He knows, or he knows, Doctor. He knows." And then Kirk you could tell he's heartbroken. He knows what he had to do, but it didn't make it any easier. In fact, now he's distraught. He's crushed. If that whole piece of the episode had been different, this wouldn't be as good of an episode. I think, in fact, it would just be another episode.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And the original screenplay, or the original writing from Harlan Ellison, it was not Kirk that prevented her. It was not Kirk. It was Spock at the end that essentially let her die. Yeah. So
Interesting.
yeah, it was going to be Spock that kind of allowed her demise to happen, which would have had a completely different feel, right? Spock is already, he's logical, of course, and so he's got a different sense of like the actions that have to happen, but that would have like vilified Spock essentially, and having Kirk do it was so much more impactful, because Kirk is very very feeling, right? He's He's very emotive. He's got a lot of emotions. He has fallen in love with Edith Keeler.
Yeah.
It just was so much more impactful that it happened the way it did, with Kirk being the one to prevent McCoy from saving Edith. Much
I'm
better ending. Yeah.
yeah, I'm very glad that it ended up the way it did.
Yeah.
Um, because that scene at the end there, like we just talked about with Spock telling the doctor, he knows, doctor, he knows. Um, that made it so much more impactful because Kirk couldn't speak. He couldn't, the whole thing, the way it played out was just, it was perfect. It made it really drove home the episode and I think made it what it is. That one
Mm-hmm.
scene right there is what really made that episode what it was.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that scene is like extremely memorable. That I always remember that scene when I think about this episode. And I've always remembered this scene just growing up and watching the reruns. Um, yeah, extremely impactful. I, there's a line from the original writing from Harlan Ellison. I'm not sure that this made it into the episode, but it was something along the lines. This is from Spock, and Spock is talking to Kirk. Spock says something like to Kirk. He says, "I will wait for you." This is in terms of Kirk needing to make a decision. I will wait for you, but time will not wait for you.
Mm.
And I like
I don't know
that.
that was in the episode, but that's really good.
Yeah, I like that because it's kind of, in a way, you're acknowledging that time is alive. Time is
Yeah.
a being, right? So, I like I like that episode, or I like that kind of phrase a lot.
Yeah, well, it would tie it back to this idea that the Guardian of Forever is this sentient being, right?
Yeah.
And it has the ability to control time in a sense and allow people to experience time through its ability to transport folks.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that would have been, I don't remember that line in the episode. So if it wasn't in there, that would have been a really powerful kind of statement. It's kind a little bit of a yin and a yang. It's a little bit of opposites here, Chris. You have Spock, the logical Vulcan, as always, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And this idea where he's removed emotion from the situation. He knows what has to be done given the information he's learned through the tricorder. On the other side, you have Kirk, who is, I think, naturally falls in love with women or has feelings for women pretty quickly, right? He's one of those kind of hopeless romantics, right, to a certain extent. And so because of the two, they play off of each other, right? You have one who is hopelessly romantic, falls in love with this woman back in time, and is having a hard time being able to not want to save her. And then you have the logical Vulcan who's trying to keep this one on the path, right? Keep almost like Spock in a way, in a gentle way, is reminding Kirk of his duties,
Mm-hmm.
reminding Kirk
Yeah.
of what's at stake, reminding Kirk of what's required of them in this situation, if they want to save these lives and they don't want history to change. So I
Yeah.
think it's the way that plays out, right? I mean, there's a lot of that interplay where with Kirk and Spock on different opposite sides of things. This episode really brings that to head because Kirk is so wrapped around the emotional aspect of it, and Spock saying, "No, look, like, hey, if these things, if Edith has to die, and if she doesn't, here's the ramifications of that," and reminding him that that's the case. And then it gets to that scene that we talked about, right, where when Spock says that if Edith doesn't die, millions of people who didn't die before will, or something like that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I think maybe this is just me reading too much into it, but when I was watching that scene and looking at his Kirk's face, to me, his face said, you know, the ramifications of it, but it also said, okay, I've made my decision. Then I know what I have to do.
Mm-hmm.
That's how it spoke to me. It may nobody else may have had that spoke to them that way, but to me, it spoke of the sheer weight of what had to be done, but also that he's realizing, okay, yeah, Spock, I get it. I know what I have to do.
Yeah.
He doesn't like it. It breaks his heart, but he knows what he has to do. And that's
Yeah.
just so that scene then from that moment on, while he's still in love with that moment on, is changes, I think, the way Kirk goes about it. And maybe
What
that's just
what an impossible like situation, right? Because then
oh yeah.
because the episode like is saying, hey, weigh the value of an individual against the value of these millions of other like individuals,
Yeah.
and then have that be how you make a decision. And that's just, it just lays out this ethical like problem there, and then the approach and the approach of the ethical solution in that's approached in this episode is like, oh, okay, well, we're gonna, it'll be the utilitarian approach where, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of this one individual, and keeping history on track the way it's supposed to be outweighs this individual in this case.
Yeah, and the other, I guess, takeaway I have from this is from a thematic, right?
Yeah.
Or morale type thing here is that every decision you make has consequences.
Yeah.
It can be good consequences and bad consequences, right? But it's telling a story that you come to a fork or a crossroads in life, and if you go this way, there's certain things that will happen and not happen. There's both consequences, and then there's unintended consequences.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go this way, it's the same thing, but in a different way, right? And so there are, I would say, in life, we come to forks in the road almost daily, right? Almost
Yeah.
daily, we have little forks in the road. Maybe they don't have quite the same impact or ripples down the road as other decisions make, but we face almost daily little forks in the road. And was it the author, was it Robert Frost, the author, who talked about came to a fork in the road and I took the road less traveled? Is that Robert Frost or
That's Frost? Yes.
Robert
Yeah.
Frost? Okay. And I think about that particular poem or whatever it was, for this episode, because the road less traveled for Kirk would be the decision that he made.
Mm-hmm.
The road that you would expect Kirk normally to take would be to save Edith because he's in love with her, right?
Yeah.
But he took what I think is the road less traveled, because that's the route he knew he had to go. He had to do. And so my kind of the thing that I really took away from this episode is the idea that, our choices, our decisions have consequences, some more than others. And many times, not every time, but many times, we have the power to make those choices. And the question is, does your choice have consequences that only affect you or affect other people? Right. And so it makes you think like, okay, not that you're going to sit here and ponder like, oh, what am I going to have for lunch today? I got to spend 4 days thinking about it, because that could have unintended consequences, which it could, right? You eat a bad meal and now you have to go to the bathroom a lot or whatever, something, right? The
Yeah.
bad spoiled meat or something, right? But at the end of the day, every decision you make is literally a ripple through time. If I were to say, I'm going to go into work tomorrow and quit my job, that would
Yeah.
have some serious ripples through time
Yeah.
for
Of
for
course.
my life. Versus I just go to work the next day and I'm doing my thing, right? There are the decisions that you make, sometimes small and sometimes large, have ripples through time in your life and others. And that's kind of the big kind of thing I took out of this episode.
No,
I guess
that's
maybe
wonderful.
one of anyways. Yeah.
No, that's wonderful. That's a beautiful thing you took away from the episode. From what I understand on this episode, I believe Gene Roddenberry was the last one to kind of touch up the writing and the script of how it was going to go. Like the original writing of it, what fundamentally it was the same, but there were some like key differences in that it was not McCoy that went through the Guardian of Forever portal. It was just like some random like crew member that it was
Ensign
like a
Ricky.
yeah, he was like a he was a drug dealing crew member or like a murderer too, and then escaped and went through the portal and changed history. So
I can see why Gene changed that, right? Because
yeah,
that would mess with this utopian future.
yeah, exactly. And then to have it be McCoy and to have it be McCoy, Spock, and Kirk, them in the past, and then have the interplay with all of them because they're so connected and each of their individual attributes are so important on how they play together. I thought, I mean, it was absolutely better to have it like it is with this. One of the things I've been thinking about is the title City on the Edge of
I was
Forever.
just gonna say that, but yes, I want to hear what you say. Go
Oh
ahead.
yeah. Oh, okay, cool. I'm glad you were thinking about the title
Yes.
too.
I literally just started thinking about we should talk about the title for a second. So we're on the same wavelength.
Yeah. A few different levels. One is the city itself. What do we interpret as the city? You know, I for a long time I thought, okay, it's the city in the past that they went to. It's the city that Kirk and Spock and McCoy were in. But now I think, well, no, or is it the city that's on the planet? Because there's a whole bunch of ancient ruins there, and it was this the city where the Guardian of Forever, the portal was? So that's one level. I was thinking about, you know, city on the edge of forever, and then this phrase "edge of forever" has been running around through my mind like a lot, and I really like it because edge of forever, and if I tweak it a little bit, end of infinity, because edge, you're coming to an end, forever is infinity. And those two kind of themes, right, those ideas are directly opposite. And in you know, edge of forever, end and infinity, but the idea of infinity and what it means and how people and scientists are trying to comprehend it, is really interesting, and how infinity relates to the idea of zero and being an end is really interesting too. But I almost see it as like this loop happening, like city on the edge of forever. And I just love that phrase because you can take it to a lot of different levels. It's contradictory, but also cyclical. Um, just like the Guardian of Forever, that sentient being, guardian of the time portal, like is. Um, those are some of my thoughts on the title. you know,
Yeah, I mean, I had some kind of similar thoughts too with the title. The title for me was okay. I thought of the city as the city that they go to,
yeah.
but the edge of forever is this idea of an edge, like you mentioned, right? This cliff, but they get to that edge, and then by getting there, there's options, or there's a couple of choices, right? You go this way on this bridge, and this takes you
Mhm.
forward forever. You go over this bridge, it takes you this way forever, but they're different routes. And so different things happen. And that then uh goes back to this choice that Kirk has to save her or not save her, right? Those two paths that diverge. That's kind of what my thought was on the title. And I was thinking about that. I was like, I wonder if Chris has thought about this title and how this interplays in with everything. So I'm glad we're
Beautiful.
both thinking the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Man, this is such a good episode. This is such a good episode. And there's I mean, we can see why this episode is up there at the very tippy top for a lot of people as one of if not the greatest episode of Star Trek that's out there.
Yeah. I feel like I want to go back, and I know I already watched it 1.5 times. You know, I'd probably go back and watch it again pretty soon. Just to uh, just to see again. It just makes me feel, except for the end, which is tragic, you know,
Yeah.
makes you feel like good to watch this episode. Just the idea of they created Edith Keeler to be the most compassionate, intuitive, visionary person that they could.
Yeah.
Right. And so this just person of esteem that could be like so valuable, and you could sense that, yes, this person, if they had a conversation with the president, would have like just a lot of impactful influence in a positive way, right?
Yeah.
And so and then I can't see, I just, I think we both feel similarly that when Joan Collins like embodying this role in this particular episode was just can't see anyone doing it like as well as
Yeah.
she did.
She was wonderful. And I'm sure it was intentionally written for her to be this character,
Ah,
to be this way, right? To
yeah,
because you want the audience to fall in love with the character like Kirk does, so that it makes it that much harder when they kill her.
yeah,
When Kirk has to make the decision to let her, not kill her, but let her die. Like the writers kill her, right? The story kills her. And so because it makes it that much more tragic that someone
yeah,
that was so wonderful, so gracious, a visionary, this perceptive, everything, all these different things, and that could do so much good in the world. And really, she does. But the good in the world that she does actually ends up being a bad thing because of the timing of events. Right? If she was born decades and decades and decades and decades later, maybe those
hmm,
types of things she did wouldn't have that same type of effect. But it would have a good effect, and it wouldn't be you know, something that leads to horrific events happening and changing, altering the
yeah,
course of history. So it's a powerful episode. For if you're watching or listening to us right now, and you haven't gone back and watched it, we highly recommend, now that you've
hmm,
listened to our review, watched our review, that go back and watch it. See if you see the things that we saw. See if things stand out to you the way it stand out to us, or if things speak to you the way they spoke to us. Maybe they don't. Maybe it speaks to you or stands out to you completely differently than what it does to us. And that's what's so great about shows like Star Trek, is that you can watch something 50 times, and the 51st time it speaks to you differently.
yeah, yeah,
That's what's
absolutely,
wonderful. So,
absolutely.
this was great. I'm glad we did this, Chris. I'm glad we did this episode because it's really wonderful. And I know we'll probably jump back into the mirror universe the next time we do a spotlight episode, and continue on our train there. But we really felt compelled, I think, to do Year of Hell Part 1 and 2. I know a lot of
Hmm.
people have been asking for that, and we wanted to. And then I think there was that mutual feeling here that we really wanted to do this City on the Edge of Forever, because it's one of the absolute um, giants in the Star Trek franchise as far as episodes go.
So glad we did this. Yeah,
Yeah, this was
absolutely.
wonderful. Yeah. So, well, thank you as always so much, everybody, for watching and listening to us everywhere. We appreciate it. We hope you enjoyed this deep dive. We really do. We love doing these. This is, I'll be honest with you, Chris, the deep dives are one of my favorite things that we do on the podcast, because we get to have these really philosophical, deep conversations. I kind of feel like maybe some of my thoughts are getting deeper than they were back when we first started doing this. It wasn't all just explosions and phasers. Um, but
Most
it's been,
excellent. Yeah.
yeah, but I really love doing these, and it's really a blast, and we hope you enjoy it. Again, be sure to check us out on Facebook and Instagram. If you haven't already, be sure to go there and follow us. Go to YouTube and subscribe there if you haven't already, to get all the latest episode updates and announcements. Be a subscriber on there so you can get the latest notifications for when the next episode comes out. If you want to watch the video version of this and see us as we talk about these deep dives and other topics we discuss. If you're listening to us on the audio side, be sure to hit the follow button on your platform so you can, again, get announcements and notifications when our new episode comes out. So we really do appreciate that, Chris. And we look
Yeah.
forward to some really fantastic guests coming up here in the next few weeks.
Oh, that's going to be a ton of fun in the next few weeks to have a chance to talk with them and
Yeah.
learn about the projects that they're doing too, if they'd be willing to share. Yeah, that'd be super.
Yeah, that'll be really good. We'll learn some really great technical aspects of things in directing and playback, and it's gonna be a great, and the podcast collab we have coming up. Oh,
Hmm.
Captain, my Captain episode. If you guys have seen the announcement on our social media, that's gonna be such a fun episode. We are gonna have a good time. Where's Bev? They are fantastic, and you're gonna love them. If you don't know them or haven't listened to their podcast, go check them out. We're gonna have a great time. We're looking forward to it.
Most excellent, my friend. Yeah.
Yeah. So, anyways, thank you so much as always, everybody. Take care, and we'll catch you next time right here on the Random Redshirt Podcast.